Ebb tide has come to me as to the sea, old age makes me yellow. Though I may grieve thereat, it approaches its food joyfully. I am Buoy, the old woman of Beara. I used to wear a smock that was ever renewed. Today it has befallen me, by reason of my mean estate, that I could not have even a cast-off smock to wear. My body is full of bitterness, seeks to go to a dwelling where it is known. When the Son of God deems it time, let him come to carry off his deposit. When my arms are seen, all bony and thin, the craft they used to practice was pleasant. They used to be about glorious kings. When my arms are seen, all bony and thin, they are not, I declare, worth raising around comely youths. I speak no honeyed words, no sheep are killed for my wedding. My hair is scant and grey, to have a mean veil over it causes no regret. Alack a day, that I sail not over youth's sea, many years of my beauty are departed, for my wantonness has been used up. Alack the day, now whatever haze there be, I must take my garment even when the sun shines. Age is upon me, I myself recognise it. Summer of youth in which we have been, I spent with its autumn. Winter of age which overwhelms everyone, its first months have come to me. I am cold indeed, every acorn is doomed to decay, after feasting by bright candles to be in the darkness of an oratory. I have had my day with kings, drinking mead and wine, now I drink whey and water among shrivelled old hags. I see on my cloak the stains of age, my reason has begun to deceive me. Grey is the hair which grows through my skin, the decay of an ancient tree is like this. My right eye has been taken from me, to be sold for a land that will be forever mine. My left eye has been taken also, to make my claim to that land more secure. The flood wave, and that of swift ebb, that the flood wave brings you, the ebb wave carries out of your hand. It is well for an island of the great sea, flood comes to it after its ebb. As for me, I expect no flood after ebb to come to me. Today there is scarcely a dwelling place I could recognise. What was in flood is all ebbing. That was a poem I wrote about turning 28. Hey-oh! Welcome, one and all, and let me tell you a tale of gods and goblins. This is a podcast exploring the bizarre and beautiful mythology, folklore, and fairy tales of the United Kingdom. We will share tales of fearsome giants, valiant heroes, witches and wizards, ghosts and ghouls, and fantastical flora and fauna. And in this episode, episode 7, we are continuing to take a look at hags. But this time our hags are not quite so horrible. In fact, they are divine. Hag goddesses. Wow, exciting, exciting.
I have always wanted to do a John Waters podcast. We're going to do Little Edie next week, yeah? When she...
Who
Francine. Oh, Francine. Oh.
No!
Ha!
You're thinking of
Edith.
Edith Massey.
Edith Massey.
Wow, this is an excellent intro to the episode. We look both cultured, and we're totally not alienating everyone immediately.
No, you're right. My apologies. Let's get this underway properly. Welcome, Heather. Happy to be here. Part 2 of why Folklore by Taylor Swift is the greatest album of all time. This week we'll be discussing Betty, Mirrorball, and Cardigan. What are your thoughts on Folklore, Heather?
I don't want to talk about it. I mean, for a start, I've not listened to it, because why would I? It's Taylor Swift. She's very bad.
You are so... Oh, you're such a contrarian.
No, I'm not. Let's wheel this back. Speaking of divine...
I've always wanted to do a John Waters podcast.
I hate...
Are we doing Edith Massey next week?
Why are you doing this? Let's introduce our divine selves, shall we? My name is Heather Morehouse, and I am your narrator and hag expert for today. Your hag professor of this evening.
Your hag host.
Yes, that's something that I was vaguely trying to stumble towarthag, I think. Warthag.
Warthag?
Like warthog.
No, I understand why would you introduce yourself as a warthog?
I think they're cool. I've been reading lots about hags and I've been having a lovely time. Who are you? Speak to me.
I am polyester Kieran Hill.
I thought you were about to say polyamorous and I was very concerned.
I am absolutely 100% not polyamorous. If you are, we love you. It ain't for me.
How are you, Kieran? How are you doing?
I am doing really well. Autumn fast approaches. The days are drawing in, and I couldn't be happier about it.
Yeah, it's been very hot lately. It's been too hot. I work in a big office that's basically a giant warehouse, and during the rather unprecedented heat wave that happened a couple of weeks ago, it was like being in a big oven. It was absolutely hideous. So yes, I've been quite enjoying a little bit of a cool, crisp bit of rain.
Also, just for our international listeners, I know we don't understand what hot or cold weather is. All Britain is mild. This is all we know.
But let me tell you, we love talking about the weather. We bloody love it. I love it. Every British person I know, we know it's boring, and yet, here we are, we're doing it.
How have you been since last we spoke? Recorded. We speak every day.
That's true. We live together. I have been absolutely fine. Perfectly adequate. Is that good chat? Is that good banter? Is that what the people want? So, the poem that we started with there, I have some truth to tell you. I have to come clean. I didn't, in fact, write it. No, I didn't.
You liar!
I know, but I just, I couldn't resist. I wanted to spin a yarn. What we actually started with was an abridged version of an Irish poem known as The Lament of the Hag of Beara. I am 100% pronouncing that wrong. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. I find Gaelic a little bit of a challenge, which I personally think is reasonable.
Is it on Duolingo?
No. Well, maybe it is, but you can't look up specific words. It will just tell you how to, I'd like to go to the shop and buy an egg.
I just thought it could be like a fun little...
Oh, you want me to take on some more work, do you?
Yeah.
I'm going to flip this table. I'm doing plenty. I don't need to learn Gaelic on Duolingo in my brief moments off. Okay, so. And the version that I read to you was, well, it was abridged by me, I've got to say, but it was translated by Gerard Murphy in Early Irish Lyrics, 8th to 12th century, which was published in 1956. And he believed that it was of Old Irish origin. It had been theorised that it was Middle Irish, which dates it to over 1,000 years old.
Goodness.
Pretty cool. And I think it's an absolutely fabulous piece of literature. The similes that they use, the ebb tide, the coming in of youth and the going out of old age, I think it's quite lovely. And it's highly celebrated also. So we've got the tides, we've got the trees and the acorns, linking it closely into the landscape itself of Ireland and the natural process of aging, focusing on the inevitability of it all. And while her lamentations and her fear of death and her witnessing her own body's decay are all very human and probably quite sympathetic, my bones are basically turning to dust and I've not even turned 30. We also get little bits of wistful nostalgia for the golden days of her youth, her beauty, and even some spite and bitterness at the old ladies that surround her, and the youth being taken from her. She's a very human character, I think, in this, but she's not just any old lady who lives on the island of Beara. No, she is a foundational figure in Irish myth. The smock that was ever renewed refers to her experiencing 7 periods of youth, during which she had many, many husbands and many children. Those are the kings that were referred to. And during those 7 periods of youth, her children and grandchildren became the tribes and races of Ireland, making her effectively the mother of the whole nation.
Without meaning to sound too dismissive, does that mean all of Ireland's inbred?
Yeah, you heard it here first. That's the take.
It always surprises me, I don't know why, when you come across something like that and it's legitimately very, very well written with a lot of layers and a lot of pathos. Like, I don't know why. And
it's from 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
You just kind of think that it's just going to be stupid or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I have no idea why.
I think we're probably just arseholes.
Yeah.
I know what you mean, though. Like, I was surprised when I read it at first. It weaves in all the aspects of the myth as well, but then it's actually just a really good and interesting piece of writing that's unfortunately unattributed. It's been recorded, there have been different versions of it recorded through time, but I think the earliest is supposed to be from around the 8th or 9th century.
Okay. I wonder if it's that case of, like, when you look at, like, really early historical texts in school and things, there's just a lot of begets and begats. Or
it's either incomprehensible or seems very simplistic.
Yeah, like the Odyssey and things. Don't get me wrong, those epic poems are great adventures, ripping yarns, but they don't, like, plumb the depths of a human psyche, you know?
Do you not think so?
I don't know, I've never read any of them.
I think it's a bit of a bold claim to say that the Odyssey isn't...
yarn.
Oh no, it's fucking great. It's bloody brilliant. My God, you should read the Odyssey. It's extremely good. Have you read any books? But yeah, so it turns out people from the olden days could actually write things. And I think one of the aspects that isn't necessarily expressly told in the poem, but adds to it, is the likelihood that people hearing it or reading it would know the background story of the character. That she had these 7 periods of youth, but at the point at which we meet her, she is in old age. She has witnessed so much life and death. You know, she's seen the death of generations of her husbands and probably children at that point as well. She's outlived her friends and family to the point at which the blessing that kept her in her prime of life has come to its end. And old age has finally caught up to her. She is alone but for other old hags, which she speaks of very derisively, and seems to be disgusted by entirely. And so she is entirely miserable with her lot.
I have a horrible feeling that's how I'm going to end up at age 60.
Drinking water with bits of cheese curd in it.
Yeah. Cursing people out in my retirement home.
And so knowing the glory and the heights at which she once resided makes the fall so much more crushing. Oh, that's some big pathos right there.
But at the same time, inevitable.
Exactly. Oh, bloody hell, human frailty or what? Quite a stark contrast indeed from the horrible hags that we were talking about last time, don't you think?
I mean, not physically, but...
Physically, very much the same. Often blind in one eye, crooked, elderly, hideous. But where in the hags we were talking about last time, that was generally seen as a sign of evil. We've got the night riding hags, we've got the storm hags, we had all the hags that lived in ponds.
The ones with big teeth.
Big teeth hags.
Actually, bad.
They were just kind of ghosts, weren't they?
They weren't evil.
Well, no, it was a punishment for the evil deeds of their father, wasn't it?
Yeah, the sins of the father, yeah.
Anyway. Oh, yeah.
Wait, no, the sins of his son. Because he murdered his father.
Yeah. Wow, spoilers! If you want to go back and learn about that, listen to last episode, it's pretty good.
Did you say spoilers for the previous episode?
Or maybe they've listened to it in the wrong order.
Don't do that. You Philistine.
Are you just shouting at our lovely listeners now?
If they're doing that, yes.
Shh, don't listen, listener. Okay, so the Hag of Beara is also known as the... Oh, God help me. Pronunciation. Cailleach.
Cailleach Beara.
No, because I specifically talk about all the etymology. I specifically talk about her bugs.
Loads and loads of bugs.
Though Cailleach is more of a title than name. Beara is generally thought to refer to the peninsula that she is based on. The peninsula of the same name, which exists, and you could go visit if you wanted to.
Can we?
I am so ready one day to do like a Gods and Goblins on tour, Goblins Roadshow.
Oh yeah.
We'll get Fiona Bruce. I could probably fashion a very convincing looking call sheet for some sort of good BBC thing. And then we've got her, we've trapped her, we'll chuck her in the boot.
We're not kidnapping a Tory.
I don't think she's a Tory. Anyway, let's not, there's enough politics in the world. We're talking about, Beara, Peninsula, Ireland. Think about it.
Good night, everyone.
Although, quite interestingly, there is some suggestion that the word Beara could also denote a wild cow goddess.
Come again?
Ooh, quite a sort of ancient land goddess, that kind of a thing. Cows being a symbol of fertility often, which makes sense really, doesn't it? As well as denoting coldness and winter. According to the writer of the Book of the Cailleach, Stories of the Wise Woman Healer. Some of those themes will come to play again, which is why I included it, so remember that. Store that in your little memory holes.
What should we keep them in?
Your memory hole. Let's take a quick detour, shall we?
Where are we going?
Dictionary Corner!
Is there a McDonald's?
No. Dictionary Corner. It's just as good. It feeds your mind. And we're going to Dictionary Corner because it feels important to explain that the word Cailleach literally means hag or old woman. Hence, it's the Cailleach Beara, the old woman from Beara.
Fantastic.
And can be used as a general term for any old lady, rather like Baba in the Slavic figure of Baba Yaga. Yaga might be her name, it might mean something else, but Baba means that she's an old lady.
Yes.
And in fact, there is a more expanded definition of Cailleach in the Carmina Gadelica, Volume 2, by Alexander Carmichael. That's a name that I can pronounce, hurrah, which was published in 1900. Cailleach being a woman, a single woman, an old woman, a carlin. Remember, that was one of the synonyms for hag that we used in the previous episode, most commonly used in Scotland. A woman without offspring, a nun, the counterpart to bodach, which is an old peasant man or a ghost. A carl, also a supernatural, we're getting into folklore a bit more now, of malign influence dwelling in dark caves. We've known about those. Oh, Black Annis, very, very scary lady of a cave.
Bamalam.
Oh, Black Annis, Bamalam, that's very good. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Did you know I lived in a cave when I was a baby?
I did. You were nursed by spiders.
I was raised by Black Annis. Ha! I was just
way to talk about your mother.
I was just there for when they dragged that cat soaked in aniseed along. Listen back to the last episode for that to make sense.
Rural Spain in the 80s, that's a good chance.
I was not born in the 80s.
You were not born in the 80s. Rural Spain in the 70s was quite like that.
As well as dwelling in woods and quarries. It also apparently refers to a period of time. The etymology of Cailleach draws from the old Gaelic word cail, meaning a veil. Elderly ladies would wear a veil on their head, and also draws into the idea of a nun wearing like a wimple over her hair. And cail is a constituent part of several Gaelic words, including the Gaelic word for nun, as well as fortune teller and owl.
Wow, okay.
Yes.
Are there only like 4 words in Gaelic, or is it just like it's like more impressionistic language? Because everything seems to have like 18 meanings.
It's a very complex language, hence why it's ripe for poetry. I can't pronounce any of it, so I would love to tell you what those words actually sound like, but it would be so upsetting for me, you, and Kieran, and our producer Chaplain Cat, that I shan't do it.
He has literally turned away from you.
But the Cailleach is also a specific divine figure, as well as being a general term for an old lady, and particularly a slightly spooky old lady. In Gaelic myth, in fact, she is a very important hag indeed. Stories of the Cailleach are arguably more of a category of stories than a singular, like, saga. They turn up quite often. She's quite a consistent theme. And rather than referring to a specific character, different times, different places, different sources treat her as, in sometimes a mother goddess, sometimes a frightful force of nature, and sometimes even, as we have seen, mostly just a sympathetic old woman who's seen a lot and is having a bad time of it, just as flawed as the rest of us, particularly you.
Oh.
I point to Kieran, not you, listener. You're great. You've got no flaws, actually. You look great.
In this sense, in the Hags we're looking at today, are they an inherently tragic figure?
No, not always. I think that poem really focuses on that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely often a little bit of... She can be a little bit feisty, for sure. She can be a bit scary. She can be quite sad and grim and dark. Generally speaking, she is a figure reaching the end of her life cycle. And, you know, that's as important a theme as life and spring and jubilance.
This is the first time in this series, this podcast that we're doing, where we've come across kind of a nuanced figure.
For hags, yeah, for sure.
I mean, even our fairies were like they generally served like a purpose.
Oh, right, and usually it's a lesson.
Yeah.
They're a teaching tool, often.
Yeah.
But yes, no, this is definitely a more... Yeah, no, I fully agree. This is a much more layered, complex character. And also, it will come across more layered because there are lots of different interpretations and tellings. But
Sure.
no, it's definitely not always tragic or sad or grim or dark. She is also a symbol of life and regeneration. So there's a lot going on here. So...
Does she ever tell jokes?
don't think so.
Yeah.
Bad sense of humour. Other than that, fully rounded. So let's begin having a bit more of a dive into the character, starting with some of her names. She is also known as Cailleach Beara or Carlin in Scotland, but variants in folklore and literature also name her Boy. She was called Boy in the opening poem, actually. She introduced herself as that name. Digdi, Melucra, Birn or Beara in Ireland. Centaina Berry on the Isle of Man. Callie Berry in Ulster. Halle Berry, yeah, played Catwoman. And also there are many localised pronunciation variants throughout, which I decided to include to forgive myself for my hideous pronunciation. Are you still laughing at that extremely good joke? Probably the best Catwoman, I'd say. Oh, I stopped you laughing. Okay, let's move on.
It was Eartha Kitt. I also accept Julie Newmar.
Okay.
Or Michelle Pfeiffer. There was a third one.
There is some suggestion, in fact, that this deity, known as the Cailleach and various other names, may descend from a culture earlier even than the Celts, as she is not actually found within Celtic tradition on the continent. Generally speaking, there will be similarities, particularly in Brittany, that share a lot of the Celtic traditions, which suggests that Irish creation stories involving the Cailleach may have been developed by the earliest settlers of the island, who predate the arrival of the Celts in the island by 7,000 years. 7,000 years!
Really?
Yes! The suggestion for this is potentially backed up by the idea that generally the earliest stories of a land will be creation myths, and she is very much part of the creation myth. Something to think about, not necessarily fact, but it means that she's really bloody old.
Interesting speculation.
Yes. She is prominent in Scottish, Irish, and Manx myth, and is closely linked to these localities. So closely linked, in fact, that her names, in their various forms, appear in many physical places in Scotland and Ireland, such as Hag's Head at the cliffs of Moher in County Clare, the Hag's Chair up top Slieve na Cailleach in County Meath in Ireland, Ben Cruachan, the largest mountain in Argyll and Bute in Scotland. There's a whirlpool at the Gulf of Corryvreckan, named after her, just off Argyll and Bute as well in Scotland, and in Glen Lyon in Perthshire. There's also Bain na Cailleach on the Isle of Skye in Scotland, so she's really all over the place. There's one particular one as well, the Hag's Head. I've seen pictures of it, it's quite cool. There's this particular rock that actually, from some angles, does look like a massive head, you know? If you Google it, it's pretty neat.
That is pretty fucking cool.
Isn't it? Yeah!
Yeah, I see that. I see it. It kind of looks like Elvis.
One of these Cailleach-linked places is known as Hag's Glen, or Coombe Cailleach, which is a...
Oh, your little face there.
Oh, this sounds good. And it is a sacred site in Munster associated with the Cailleach. The valley of Coombe Cailleach forms a part of McKilligody's Reeks, which is Ireland's highest mountain range. And it is so named because there was a tale of a hag that lived in the glen who cared for a small child. And a rock there was imprinted with their footprints.
Oh, the Hags of the Child.
Both. There's some big footprints and some little footprints, and the idea is that they left their footprints upon them. And in fact, an old woman who lived there alone in that same glen in the 19th century was given the name of Cailleach. I hope kindly, as opposed to disparagingly.
Did she want that name?
Well, they were probably just calling her old lady, really, weren't they?
Yeah.
But still. And I would argue that the ubiquity of her name within the landscape of the Gaelic areas of this country is pretty unsurprising when you consider how ancient her myth is. this has been a consistent part of the mythology of these areas for thousands and thousands of years, potentially. And so, you see a rock that looks like an old lady?
You name it.
That's probably hag rock.
Yeah.
You see some holes in a rock on the ground? That's probably hag footprints.
Hag holes.
They're hag holes. But the Cailleach is said to be older even than the land itself, more ancient than we can know. She is said to have created the landscape itself by dropping rocks from her apron or throwing them at an enemy. She's feisty. Or by running from an angry bull and then turning him into a rock.
Wow.
Which forms some of the hills. And there's even one tale that she was towing chunks of earth with a rope, and that rope broke under the weight of them, and when the earth fell into the water, it formed the separate islands of Ireland. Oh. But as well as being unknowably old, she is also immensely strong. She's a strong lady.
Cue man, I feel like a woman.
Oh, yes. Oh, I wish we could. That'd be nice. Wonder if we could justify it's for satirical or whatever the other purposes that means you're allowed to.
We'll be sued.
I won't be sued. It would just be taken down.
Demonetized. This is our only source of income.
We are making no money. We've made a loss. In fact, she will best even the fastest reaper in the land, despite her feeble-looking frame. But not only that, although she is blind in one eye, a very common trait in hag tales, as we've noticed, she can see for 20 miles. She can also jump over mountains, and perhaps join her Welsh hag pals, the Gwychlion, in riding on storms in some versions of her tale.
Badass.
Yeah!
Ride with lightning.
Her importance in some of these tales is emphasised by her links with sovereignty and kings, not only being the wife of many kings of Ireland when having her 7 periods of youth and birthing all of the tribes and whatnot, but also, if a king is just and lacking in vanity to a sufficient degree, he will do his solemn duty and have a night of passion with the Cailleach, or kiss her, if the tales are being quite polite, and that proves that he is just and kind, and the land will flourish under his rule, as the Cailleach does in some of these tales, because once he does, she turns into a comely lass, a comely young maiden.
His penis has the a regenerative ability.
Some could say that. I would say it's more that...
Like a miracle grow, but a dick.
I think my mum listens to this.
Like a miracle grow, but a willy.
Hence why I'm trying to be. Anyway.
You swear so much in this podcast.
No, I don't.
Oh, do you just cut all the bits where you swear out?
I barely swear anyway in the podcast.
Oh.
Quite so. I would argue, however, that the regenerative power is not so much within the king's bits and bobs, junk in his trousers. It is more within the hag herself, the Cailleach, because she is also a goddess of abundance and nature, of harvests and renewal. The symbolic ending of the life is very, of course, closely linked to the rebirth that comes afterwards. So it's really, she's the renewal and rebirth, not so much the king. But it symbolises the country having a plentiful and good time under the rule of a just king who is a good enough guy that he'll...
Sleep with a hag.
Give a hag a wonderful evening.
Wine and dine them.
Take her out on a lovely date. The renewal aspect, of course, comes up in the original tale that we were talking about, the Hag of Beara, who has 7 periods of youth.
Are those 7 periods, defined, or are they just 7 periods of youth?
I think it's more that she goes back to maidenhood 7 times. It's a magical number.
Okay, so I was fundamentally misunderstanding then. I thought you meant 7 stages of youth. She'd each time go...
Oh, no, it's not the 7 stages of man.
Oh, that's kind of what I was thinking of,
Right.
but like a variant on that or something.
No, it's that she becomes a young lady, and she goes through adulthood and into, I guess, what would be the start of middle age, and then magically she becomes a young lady again.
And that happens 7 times
And that
over.
happens 7 times, so that's why she has 7 periods of youth.
I get you.
Gotcha. Okay. back of the net. And that is, of course, what allows her to be the mother of the whole nation of Ireland, because that's a lot of time. However, she is also closely linked to more primitive nature spirits that would guard the grains and as such be spirits of the harvests and the seasons that come along with that as well. These sorts of nature spirits were discussed in our fairy series that are very closely linked. Indeed, during Irish harvest festivities, the last sheaf of corn would be named the Cailleach, and it would be dressed up in a little outfit, a little lady's outfit. And it would be a key part of the harvest ritual, and they would keep it safe and nicely stored until the following year to ensure that a good harvest would continue.
Oh, wow.
So, again, the eternal cycle of abundance and harvests and all that good stuff.
Would that not have rotted in like a year?
I'm sure they had systems of drying it out carefully.
Yeah. These people probably know better than I do how agriculture works.
Well, indeed, and good grain harvests were extremely vital, more so really than perishable vegetables and such. Grains were really what kept people alive during the cold winters, so keeping that little sheaf of grain healthy and dry and happy, good little Cailleach, was quite vital.
Much like keeping a lighter lit for 24 hours gets you into the familiar.
Are you referring to the last episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure we watched yesterday?
I'm referring to mafioso history.
Yes.
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 5, Golden Wind.
It's very good.
Mm-hmm.
Real return to form, I'd say. Maybe we should do a segment where we just, recommend stuff that we've been watching or listening to or whatever.
I think so.
I would like to include some segments, you know?
Yeah.
Into this.
Maybe do it at the start of the episode.
We could do that. If anyone wants anything in particular for us to do each week. We don't do it every week.
Each episode, each period. If you want what we've been listening to, what we've been up to, what we recommend, maybe we could do a track-by-track analysis of Folklore by Taylor Swift.
Oh my god, no! Okay. Moving on swiftly. Okay. So this little grain effigy in Scotland would be hung in the home to ward away evil spirits during the winter.
It shows how multi-purpose these things work.
Oh yeah, it's like a Swiss Army knife of folkloric bits of corn in dresses.
Yes.
It also kind of shows the way in which an idea can have quite a specific meaning. You know, this item will bring the harvests back, and then it kind of gets almost corrupted or altered to just it'll make bad things not be here. You can see how these things change and shift in different locations and in different times. And another little bit of folkloric repetition that I quite enjoyed when learning about this aspect of the Cailleach being particularly related to harvest traditions was that it was said, much like the nature spirits that we mentioned previously in the fairies series, when talking about harvest and landscape, the Cailleach would appear in the form of a hare in the field. So again, seeing a hare when you're harvesting suggests that it's going to go well, and that she is overseeing the harvest and bringing some good wishes upon it. So we can see from here that the Cailleach is quite clearly connected to nature and the cycles of nature, and there are many references to the Cailleach and the weather specifically. I mean, we're British, we've got to talk about the weather. Mm-hmm. However, a lot of these aspects will illuminate her darker side. Ooh. Because she is quite a wild and primal figure. She's one of these more ancient deities, and often that can kind of lead you to a more wild side of folk belief. And this reveals the potential for destruction that comes along with the creation. Again, we're having a bit of cycles of regeneration here. And inclement weather was the Cailleach's particular stock in trade. She could be a harbinger of bad news as well for the harvester. Not always a happy hare bringing in good grains, because the Cailleach would sometimes appear as a crane. The bird a crane, not the digger type thing, with sticks in her beak that would warn of storms, which would, of course, be very inopportune during harvesting season when dry weather is necessary to keep everything stored well for the winter. I also rather enjoy this one saying, people would note that the Cailleach is trampling the blankets tonight when winter thunder was heard.
That's so fucking cool.
She's jumping on her bed.
Yeah, man.
She's fun. She's fun.
Having a bit of a tantrum.
Yeah. And when talking about storms and whatnot, the description that we listened to a little bit of earlier from the Carmina Gadelica continues. According to some people, Cailleach as a period of time is the first week of April, and it is represented as a wild hag with a venomous temper, hurrying about with a magic wand in her withered hand, switching the grass and keeping down vegetation, to the detriment of man and beast. When, however, the grass grows back, helped by the warm sun, the gentle dew, and the fragrant rain overcomes the Cailleach, and she flies into a terrible temper and throws away her wand into the root of a whin bush, and then she disappears in a whirling cloud of angry passion till the beginning of April comes again.
Wow, she goes crazy.
She goes cuckoo coconuts. And that is the explanation for the wild storms that happen at the start of April.
That is such a cool explanation.
The folklorist Donald Alexander Mackenzie tells us, when writing at the start of the 20th century, that Gaelic-speaking people still refer to certain gales in February and March by their ancient names, the whistling wind and the sweeper. And on the northeastern coast, even those fisherfolks who are not Gaelic speakers still tell of the fierce southwesterly gales of early spring that were caused by the storm wife who they called Gentle Annie. This Annie may be the same old deity as Black Annis of Leicestershire and Anu of Ireland.
Do we think there's much chance of them being related to Black Annis? Because Black Annis seems to be quite like a...
Evil.
Yeah, kind of a bog standard, like, but localised boogeyman type.
I think it's mostly because of the name. Anu, Anna, Annis. I've seen it come up a few times that there's a potential that those might be linked, and them being hags of sorts, you've got like a potential nice interpretation of the hag and a more evil interpretation. It's more of the name, I think, that makes people think that they're linked. But it just goes to show that there's a less scary version of the Cailleach, who also brings some gales and winds. But speaking of nasty hags, she's also connected to household curses. Here's one that I found. If unused meal from the baking of a bannock cake is put back in the meal chest, the Cailleach, Carlin, will come and sit in the chest, eating up all of the luck of the family, and will not leave till 5 o'clock in the morning, the unfortunate minute.
You opening the chest of this old woman.
Just eating up all your flour.
I'm not going nowhere, not till 5 in the morning.
She's actually eaten all your luck as well.
Oh, God.
Yes. It means that you can't put unused meal from the baking of your bannock cake back in the cupboard. You've got to use it all up or dispose of it correctly.
But how do you dispose of it correctly? Other than just using it all up?
I don't know exactly how you handle the baking of a bannock cake, to be honest.
Have you been putting the meal back? Because
I know.
Because we need luck, Heather.
Is this why such ills are constantly befalling us?
I think it might be.
So reasonably, that's quite a fun little household curse, I personally think, other than the fact that she's consuming luck from your soul.
Well, I mean, it's fun until it happens to you.
Well, that's true. Okay, but it's a relatively flippant one.
Yeah.
What's rather less flippant is bringing back her more sort of primal nature. The Cailleach is also the patron of wild animals, as well as agriculture and harvests. She tends to deer in some tales, which isn't very scary, but again, her more fearsome side rears its head because she's also the patron of wolves that would draw closer to fields and homes as the hunger of winter makes them look for fresh blood, which is rather scary.
Don't want a wolf near you.
Nuh-uh.
Heather's doing her wolf be gone dance. I wish you all could see it.
So again, the dangerous parts of winter, particularly, she's often connected to winter, which leads me into the next section. In his book Wonder Tales from Scottish Myth and Legend, in which he mentioned the winds earlier, Mackenzie brings together several accounts of the Cailleach story and emphasises her connection with the cycle of the seasons. He explains that Beara was regarded as a hard and cruel old woman, and the story of her exploits is the story of the weather conditions in winter and early spring. She rouses the dangerous whirlpool of Corryvreckan, she brings the snow, she unlooses the torrents that causes the rivers to overflow, and indeed Mackenzie really hammers this point home by dubbing her Beara, Queen of Winter, and tells us that she was considered to be the mother of all Scottish gods.
Beara, the Queen of Winter, was old. So old that she remembered where there was land where now sits water, and water where now sits land. She had long ceased to count the years. She saw the fields ploughed, and the barley that grew upon them sharp and juicy. Yonder was a loch. She remembered when it was a small round well. In those days she was a fair young girl, and now she was old and frail and dark and miserable. The trees were beginning to blossom. Spring was coming. It was time for the old queen to leave her throne and make way for Angus, king of the summer, and begin her pilgrimage to the green isle of the west, where sat the Well of Youth.
I'd like one of those.
The Green Isle was a mystic land, shrouded in fog, that drifted between Ireland and the Hebrides. Its magical waters were at their most potent at the turn of the season. On the last night of her reign, as the days lengthened for the first time, she would sit alone in the damp darkness, awaiting the first beam of light to spread across the well. It had to be timed, so that she took a drink as the first ray of light shone. But before the first bird could sing, or the first dog could bark, should she be late, then dark old Beara would crumble to dust, and winter would cease to be. So she drank. She drank deep, and as the water hydrated her dusty bones, her visage was shift and change. Before, the aged Beara was fearsome to look upon. She had only one eye, but the sight of it was keen and sharp as ice, and swift as the mackerel of the ocean. Her complexion was a dull, dark blue, her teeth were red as rust, and her locks, which lay heavy on her shoulders, were white as an aspen, covered with hoarfrost. All her clothing was grey, and she was never seen without her great dun-coloured shawl, which was drawn closely round her shoulders. Once she had taken her fill of water, she would lie down beneath a willow tree, and upon wakening, her visage had changed considerably. She rose up as a beautiful girl with long hair yellow as buds of broom, cheeks red as rowan berries, and blue eyes that sparkled like the summer sea in sunshine. As the months passed, she began to age again, rapidly so. As the leaves turned with the autumn, she began to wither until she took her familiar form as the Hag of Beara. As winter came forth, before her rage truly took hold, she wandered the shorelines of Scotland singing, "O life that ebbs like the sea, I am weary and old, I am weary and old. Oh, how can I happy be, all alone in the dark and the cold? I am the old Bearer again, my mantle no longer is green. I think of my beauty with pain, and the days when another was queen. My arms are withered and thin, my hair once golden is grey. 'Tis winter my reign doth begin, youth summer has faded away. Youth summer and autumn have fled, I am weary and old, I am weary and old. Every flower must fade and fall dead, when the wind blows cold, when the wind blows cold."
So it even ends with a reimagining of the initial poem, doesn't it?
It
Of the
certainly does.
lament of the Hag of Beara. Oh, exciting. Although he's made it even more abridged and actually a little bit easier to understand. I believe you noted quite a fun little thing as
Yes.
well when writing this up.
It ties in with our hags being creators, like these divine hags being creators of a landscape around them.
Yes.
So there's a story that goes that Beara had 8 lesser hags
Oh.
of her handmaidens, one of which was called Ness, and her job was to open and shut this well at night.
In Inverness.
Yes.
Yes.
In the Ness.
The well was in Ness. The Ness.
Yes.
It was Inverness.
Yes. One night, she's late doing other stuff. Maybe she's just forgotten. Who knows? But she arrives to find the well has flooded
Oh no.
before she got a chance to close it. So she looks around and suddenly she notices this massive tidal wave coming towards her.
Oh boy.
As she's running away from it, Beara, who's sat on top of Ben Nevis, who, as we know, can see for 20 miles and has one good eye, and gets absolutely apoplectic and is like, "You've destroyed another thing from my past. I'm this old woman who's seen, the mountains crumble and the seas rise, and another thing that I loved has gone forever because of you.
Bloody ruined it, Nest. You're an idiot.
Yes. And so she's like, you know what? You're going to become part of the water. The flood consumes Ness. And in that moment, Loch Ness is born.
She becomes Loch Ness.
She becomes the Loch Ness monster.
I don't know if that's it. She becomes the loch itself.
Who wrote this?
I think.
Me, I wrote this. She becomes a Loch Ness monster.
That's interesting, the idea in some of the stories of her having some lower hags, some lowly hags, that are kind of her hag coterie.
Yes.
Is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
A coterie of hags? Oh, I'd love to have one of those. I think maybe once I am old I shall have one. But generally speaking...
You don't like enough people to have a coterie.
No, that's true. I do hate everyone.
Except Kieran. Hey!
Generally speaking, however, Cailleach, she goes it alone. She's a bit of a loner, which I respect. And her antithesis is the goddess Brigid, or Bride, the bride of King Angus, at times, in some stories.
Who we just spoke of.
Yes, although you deleted the bit about his wife being bride.
And his wife Bride. you can put that in now.
And Brigid or Bride rules over the summertime. Makes sense, right? As we, I'm sure, know at this point in time, the key dates in the Celtic folkloric calendar are Samhain, or October the 31st to the 1st of November, when the year draws to a close and winter begins, and the Cailleach begins her reign, as well as there are, of course, witches, ghosts, and the unseelie horde sweeping through the night and generally causing all kinds of tomfoolery. And the other main event is Bealtaine. I'm still trying to do the proper pronunciations.
Keep it up, man.
Yes. Which is held on the 1st of May. The start of the year, the start of the spring, when Bride returns, the Cailleach retreats, and she returns to her elderly state, as we discussed previously. Mummers. Do you know about mummers?
They were travelling actors.
Yeah. Would hold plays around this time of year, and would help to drive away the Cailleach when spring came around in their mumming plays. We'll probably talk about them in further detail in future, but it's quite fun. I love a bit of folk theatre.
Do they have any links like Commedia dell'arte?
I've no idea.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Other than their travelling troubadours.
Which is what we will be, eventually.
What?
When we tour.
Oh my god! No!
We're going to put on plays for everyone. Tell your local theatre if you want to see it.
Yeah, okay, we're not doing that. but the mummers would welcome, when doing these plays, her antithesis, Bride or Brigid, to reign in place of the cruel, mean, cold, and generally bloody, bastardly Cailleach. In one story, known as The Coming of Angus and Bride, the Cailleach is terribly cruel to her summer counterpart, and it is said that all the long winter Beare kept captive a beautiful young princess named Bride, because she was jealous of Bride's beauty, and gave her ragged clothing to wear, and put her to work amongst the servants in the kitchen of her mountain castle, where the girl had to perform the meanest tasks. Beare scolded her continually, finding fault with everything she did, and Bride's life was made very wretched.
I know the feeling.
Oh! Sick burn. Clean out the scullery.
We don't have a scullery.
I know, I was just trying to impress the listeners.
Build a scullery, then clean it.
So she's a little bit of a Cinderella story in that one.
I mean, I can't say I necessarily blame Beara for being a bit jealous. Like, Bride's this beautiful creature who gets to trot around with a beautiful husband in the, in the depths of summer.
She actually gets to enjoy a bit of warm weather.
Yeah, Beara just has to sit with one eye, making sure none of her idiot haglings
flood her plains. When discussing spring and its personification, Mackenzie shares that the old people believed that somewhere in the west the spirit of spring had its hiding place, although this was a less defined general nature spirit than a fully characterised deity. And they imagined that this hiding place to be a green floating island on which the sun always shone and the flowers were always blooming. Presumably the island on which the Fountain of Youth resides is that very island itself.
Certainly is, the green island of the west. Floating between Ireland and the Hebrides.
Yes. Do you think it's also something to do with Avalon? No, is that
I
what I'm
have
thinking?
no idea what you're talking about.
Or Tir na Nog?
Oh, that one. I do know that one. I was going to say Brigadoon.
Oh! Ooh, that's a great film. It's actually an absolute nightmare.
Atrocious piece of cinema.
Fever dream of early Hollywood horror. It's got lots of great kilts though. I'm getting distracted. Okay, so
Her see the kilt into her mind wanders.
yeah, not to the downstairs, to the wonderful tartans. Oh, those colour schemes.
In most other circumstances, I wouldn't believe somebody when they said that, but knowing Heather,
I'm a fiend for a textile. I'm quite literally the most boring person in the world. Okay, so during the reign of Beara, Queen of Winter, the spirit of spring, the old people thought, was always trying to visit Scotland. And they imagined that Beara raised the storms of January and February to prolong her reign by keeping the grass from growing. And in some areas of Scotland and the Isle of Man, the link between the Cailleach and Brigid is even closer than mere enemies. Although you must always keep your enemies close. Right? Is that the saying?
I have heard
I
that.
prefer to keep my enemies far away from me, or even avoid making enemies to begin with.
That's why I've become my own worst enemy.
That's smart, because then you're always close.
Can't get closer than you.
That's true. You are within yourself, and you hate that.
I really do.
Life is hell. What was I saying? Okay, so the link between the Cailleach and Brigid is even closer in these areas, with the hag actually transforming into the beautiful summer queen, and only being known as the Cailleach during the latter half of the year. So they are, in fact, one and the same figure, just transforming within oneself. In fact, there seems to me to be a little bit of a comparison to draw between this idea and the idea of the Hag of Beara returning to youth and maidenhood several times over and over. As she brings life into the country again and again, life comes into her. So regeneration is built into these Cailleach stories. And hence, although it seems kind of oxymoronic at first glance, but the themes of rebirth and regeneration, despite a hag being a figure of age and decay, makes her very much a fertility deity.
Do you think that King Angus noticed?
What? His beautiful summer goddess bride turned into an old lady?
Because he seems to hate the old lady, but love his bride.
Yeah, well, I guess half of the year he is a sad man.
Do you think he's... Where's she gone?
I don't know. There is a tale from the Isle of Man that on Imbolc, the festival that is held on the 1st of February of each year, the Cailleach runs out of firewood for the winter, and on that day she will go out in search of more twigs to keep her fire lit. In the Manx tradition, she transforms into a bird and collects firewood in her beak, a little like the twig-holding bird that warned the harvesters of rains earlier on. In versions of this story from Ireland and Scotland, though, she heads out in her form as a gloomy old woman. Her goal is to gather enough firewood to extend the winter, and in turn to extend her reign. So she wishes to control the weather and make the day sunny and bright while searching for her kindling, so that it is dry when she takes it back home. However, sometimes she will accidentally oversleep, and she can't brighten up the weather, and so her search for extra wood is fruitless. Hence, the tradition tells that a wet and grey 1st of February would mean an early spring, but fine weather would mean that it's a brief bit of brightness and winter will return again.
It's one of the few holidays where you're kind of hoping for it to rain on that day.
Yeah, exactly. Indeed, this story seems to affirm a statement that Mackenzie, once again, makes that while people believed in the Cailleach Beara and these tales, they also believed that there were mysterious powers or a singular power greater than the gods and goddesses. Beara, the winter queen, might raise storms and bring snow and frost, but when the spring season came on, she could not prevent the grass growing or the trees budding. The powers which caused the seasons to change were never named, and they were not given human attributes. So there is a power greater than these gods and goddesses.
It's generally love.
I think the power might be love. I guess in this interpretation, he's not including the Christianization of a lot of these tales, which does happen a lot. They'll have all these minor deities, and then but they all fall in line with God after all. I mean, it's quite thrifty, really. Kind of, you don't want to throw away all your old ideas and stories. Just recycle them.
Just make it God.
Just make it God. So in many tellings, the Cailleach is older than memory, older than the water and the mountains, and that seems to place her as a kind of primordial creator deity.
That's good.
But sometimes she has family too. She's not all alone. In some versions of the myth, the Hag Beara has two further, identical, although less famous, sisters, who live on the peninsulas of Dingle, you're laughing at the word Dingle, and Iverall, which means that Beara is really the Beyonce of hags. Although they're not sisters, are they? Ugh. She's the
Gina Nolan.
famous core of the cause.
Andrea.
That's right. Isn't one of the cores a gentleman?
Jim.
I guess he's King Angus.
He's a conspiracy theorist now.
Do him and the fella from Blink-182 sometimes chat about how the Earth's flat? They can get B.O.B. involved as well.
God, I forgot about B.O.B.
Wasn't he actually having quite a successful career until he suddenly decided, I'm going to make my entire thing being that the Earth's flat?
It was a bold career move.
You've got to go hard.
Yeah, go hard or go home.
Just go home.
You know, Kate Bush believes in aliens. Apparently she used to have a UFO hunting club with Robbie Williams.
Oh, I don't like that.
I can't imagine anything worse than being like trapped overnight with Robbie Williams and nothing to do but watch the skies.
Hitler?
I don't know, at least.
Trapped with Robbie Williams overnight and watching Hitler.
At least Hitler might like fart or something. No.
I love that that's your peak of entertainment. It is funny. That's why we stay together. They do say 3 is the magic number.
I have heard that from both you and De La Soul.
To experts on the subject. Because triplication is quite a common concept in hag and witchy sorts of tales, if you think about it. There's the Weird Sisters, of course, in Macbeth. When shall we three meet again? Is one of their classic quotes.
Stay tuned to the end of the podcast to hear more.
Double, toilet trouble. The Muses of Greece, of course. And, at times, a relation to the Cailleach, the Morrigan, the 3 war goddesses of Celtic myth, who also are known to appear in hag-like guises, but I think I shall maybe talk about those at a later stage. Either way, we can certainly see that hags in Gaelic myth are kind of a big deal. While our last episode focused on hags as monsters, witches, nightmares, and long-toothed ghouls, we went straight back to early myth this time. Creation myth. Much more gods than goblins, one could say. And yet, what struck me when examining this is not only how complex and varied different versions of the Cailleach tale are, but how much humanity is present in them. How much pathos. That's a word I've used at least 3 times in this. And I think it's quite a stark contrast, and maybe it shows that Gaelic Britain respects old ladies, goddammit. And that is how I'm going to conclude this.
Good on you, I say. Honestly, I actually quite like that conclusion. That Gaelic traditions respected old women, and that, you know, you can see a clear delineation as time goes on between the old gods and the kind of the Christian-infused boogeymen. Respectful versus a fear of women.
That's true, actually. This was a much fairer assessment. Although, to be fair, she generally is seen as a quite cruel and mean-spirited figure, bringing the winds and the rains and the cold, but also the fact that there's a kind of inevitability with that the cold has to come for the sun to rise, you know?
Yeah.
It's eternal return. Like Persephone, particularly when Cailleach and Brigid are being the same figure.
Who's Persephone? Asking for those listening that don't know who Persephone is.
Okay, so Persephone is the goddess of, well, the underworld, but also of spring in Greek myth. She was the one who was taken by Hades down into the underworld after she ate the pomegranate. A little bit like eating fairy food, don't you think? And was cursed to be his wife, but she manages to escape for half of the year, and she brings the spring and the summer, and then she has to plunge back down into Hades for the second half of the year and be the gloomy and dark queen of the underworld.
Does she look into a puddle at one point as well?
That's Narcissus.
Okay. I'm glad you're here with me at this podcast.
I've come to realise that you don't know shit. Did you know that eternal return is quite a key element of Thus Spake Zarathustra by Nietzsche?
I did, actually, yes.
In these tales, there's a bit of a hopefulness to eternal return, you know. Oh God, thank Christ for that. Summer's coming back. Yes, this is good. He interpreted it as the horror of living. I was going to talk about all different kinds of positive-ish hags, but I just got completely fixated on the Cailleach. I just wanted to learn more and more and more, and realistically, I've left a lot out as well.
So who knows? At some point in time...
Maybe there'll be a redux.
But not next week.
Not next week? No.
Because we don't do weekly podcasts.
Well, that is a fair point. We're going to be launching down a different avenue next time. We're going to be... I'm trying to think of some sort of canine pun. I can't. Get wagging your tails, because we're going to be learning about black dogs.
We're going to be barking up a different tree.
That's much better. Say that.
And next week, we will be barking up a different tree altogether when we look at the black dog. We'll be looking at them as ghosts and omens and possibly the devil himself.
Ghosts and ghouls.
Oh, yes.
Woof, 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 woof. Bark, bark, bark. No, horse. Hang on.
What is that? Is that a horse? Is that a dog saying the word
Give me
horse?
a second. Just give me a... We're going to be in the dog house. I cannot believe it.
And who knows? Maybe we'll even revisit an old friend from a previous episode. Arthur Conan Doyle.
Arthur Conan Dog.
Oh my God, you're the worst.
I'm not very good at puns.
You are not. Throw me a bone here.
See, that's good. I keep just wanting to say Weetabix. Meaty bits. Kibble.
What can't be?
I kibble believe it. Hot meat. Cerberus. Leave me alone. You'll be wolfing down these episodes.
Leave me alone.
Oh no, you've lost your shoes. Maybe they're in the Lost and Hound. You're leading me down a path of least resistance. No.
Stop telling shaggy dog stories, man.
Oh!
Oh, have mercy.
Right, okay, before this descends into...
Before this becomes a dog's dinner?
Oh, yes! Before this becomes a dog's dinner, I made that joke.
You fucking didn't.
Goodbye. Do hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure that you are subscribed to us on Stitcher or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you choose to listen to podcasts. We're on pretty much all of them. Oh, we've even registered to be listed on Audible, who are going to be hosting podcasts soon.
Huh.
Yeah.
Have we?
So that's exciting. Until then, I recommend checking out our show notes where a bibliography for the episode will be listed. We use a lot of public domain sources. To catch up with us in the meantime, we are on all the social media places at Gods and Goblins, or you can slide up into our email inbox with any comments and queries. That's godgobpod@gmail.com. And if you really enjoyed it, we would be delighted if you left us a review on iTunes.
And let us know if you do, because we like to read them, because we're vainglorious bastards.
Absolutely.
So please say nice things about us. It really makes our week. I'm cripplingly lonely. I want someone to say something to me. Anything.
It might even make Kieran smile for once in his life.
I've forgotten how.
And with that, all that's left to do is say goodbye.
My cheeks hurt.
From me, Heather Morehouse.
Sadness Incarnate, Kieran Hill. Hogboy, Kieran Hill. Hogmaster, Kieran Hill.
Big Hog.
The Queen of Winter, Kieran Hill. Autumn's Jester.
And I'm a spring chicken. Goodbye.